What's up, YouTube? We back again with another video. I know it's been a minute, but we back. We back at it like a crack at it. And this video we got is I think his name is Clint Hill. Yeah, Clint Hill. He's a now retired Secret Service agent. I think he actually passed away like maybe 4 years ago or so. Don't quote me on that. Don't might have to fact check that, but yeah, he was one of the Service agents that were actually in the car with JFK whenever he got assassinated. So it's just interesting to see his just hear his insight and his perspective of what actually happened. Straight from somebody who was actually there. So here we go. Let's get into it. Let's see.
The right side of his face was up. I could see his eyes were fixed. There's a hole in the skull. I could see in that hole there was no brain matter left. It had all been blown out.
Sheesh. Now that's graphic right there. To start off, that's graphic.
We were very concerned about it, but we knew we didn't have much of a choice. In this particular instance, going into Texas, the reason for the trip was maximum visibility and maximum exposure for President and Mrs. Kennedy, because they wanted as many people to be up close and personal to him as they possibly could get. And so that was the purpose of the trip. And that meant open cars no matter where we went. They asked, the agents were instructed to back off as much as possible. There were times when I got up very, very close, but it was because of the situation that developed. But under normal circumstances, we tried to stay as far away as we could to make them feel like that they were just among their friends and people along the side of the street, and wanted the people inside the street to feel like there was no barrier between them and the President and Mrs. Kennedy.
So it was the president and his wife, and Governor Connolly and his wife in that car. Where were you, and how far away?
That was the presidential car. I was in the immediate car behind him, the follow-up car.
Y'all, do y'all think, I always had this thought, do y'all think it was a good idea to put the president of the United States in a convertible at any time? I don't think that was a good idea from the jump. I think it was a setup, because how do you not, you got all these security measures. I'm pretty sure they check buildings, cars, hotels, rooftops, everywhere you can possibly hide, but you let the president be out and open like a convertible. If anything, I think that should be the car that didn't have a converted top. But I don't know. That's just me.
Which we ran between about 3 to 5 feet between the two cars at all times, no matter what the speed. I was on the left-hand side of the running board of that car. That was also an open car. There were 8 agents in that car and 2 members of President Kennedy's staff. Kenny O'Donnell, his chief of staff, and Dave Powers, his chief personal assistant. I was on the left side of the car on the running board, and as we went through an area called Dealey Plaza, I was scanning the area. It was just a grassy area. And the crowd, which had been very large as we've traveled through Dallas, had dropped off as we approached Dealey Plaza. It was the end of the motorcade, pretty much. We were going to get on an expressway to take the president to a speech site called the Trade Mart. And there was an overpass we were going to have to go under, and I was looking at that, and I noticed there was some police on top, and that was good enough for me. And we noticed, though, as we traveled down the streets of Dallas, that the windows were open on buildings, and people were on fire escapes or on top of buildings, any place they could be to get a better view of the motorcade. And the same was true of the building we passed on the corner of Houston and Elm Street. It was called the Texas School Book Depository. We saw that there were about 4 or 5 windows open in that building, and there were some workmen sitting on a ledge, apparently having lunch, taking a lunch break, watching the motorcade as we approached. And we had turned down on Elm Street, maybe 150 feet. And as I was scanning to my left, I heard this explosive noise from the rear over my right shoulder. I didn't recognize it as a gunshot initially, So I started to turn toward that noise, and I only got as far as the back of the president's car because I saw the president's reaction, and that's when I realized it had been a gunshot. He grabbed at his throat, and he started to fall to his left. He had a back brace on, which prevented him from really bending much forward, but also immediately in front of him was seated Governor Connally in a jump seat, and the back of that jump seat was almost up against the knees of President Kennedy. So he started to fall to his left, and when I then realized this was a gunshot, so I jumped from my position and I ran toward the presidential car with the intent of getting up on top of the back to provide a shield there for President and Mrs. Kennedy. Now, when I ran, I had to go between a motorcycle officer on his motorcycle and the car I was on. There was engine noise, and they told me later there was a second shot at that time, but I never heard that shot.
So, my mistake, y'all. Apparently, this guy was not in the car. I was under the impression that he was one of the guys in the car. Like, either I knew he wasn't the driver. I thought maybe he was the passenger or something. I think there's another guy, maybe not, but apparently he's not one of the people that was in the car, but he was one of the closest, responding Secret Service agents. So my bad about that, but this still crazy. His perspective is still crazy. I don't even know if the other people that were in the car are still alive. So and this guy's not alive anymore either. I think he died like 4 years ago, like I said. So don't quote me on that, but yeah.
And as I approached the car, just as I was getting there, there was another shot that was fired. That one I heard and I felt because at that time the president had fallen a little bit farther to his left and his head was way down, kind of like this. And that shot hit him in the back of the head, and then it erupted out of the upper right quadrant, just above the ear. And it blew that portion of the skull, which was still attached to the scalp, forward like a flap, kind of. And out of that wound gushed blood and bone fragments and brain matter all over the back of the car, all over me, all over Mrs. Kennedy.
This game,
Yeah, we're definitely gonna skip this.
you're not ready for it.
When I started to get up in the car, Mrs. Kennedy came up in the trunk. She was trying to grab some of that material that had erupted out of the president's head, and she managed to get some of it in her hand.
What?
I grabbed her and put her in the back seat. When I did that, the president's body fell to his left into her lap. The right side of his face was up. I could see his eyes were fixed. There was a hole in the skull. I could see in that hole there was no brain matter left. It had all been blown out. I assumed he had passed. He was dead. So I turned and gave a thumbs down to the other agents on the car behind because they hadn't had a chance to react like I did, because they turned toward the noise too for guys on the other side of the car, which meant they turned away from the president just at the moment that he was going to be shot. By the time they turned back, I was already at the car. It was too late for them. They couldn't do anything.
What was your immediate reaction then? And was it you that gave the order to go to the hospital?
Well, I screamed at the driver to get to the hospital, but the agent in the right front
He
seat,
should have already been.
he also
Literally already been flooring it to the hospital. The president is shot in the back of the head. What else are you gonna do? Get to the hospitals right down. I live in Dallas, by the way, so there's a hospital right down the road from where JFK got shot. I live here. Get there. You're not that far. I feel like a lot of things here could have been avoided for sure if they were thought out. But it seems like just on this particular day, they weren't too, they didn't tie up all their loose ends. So
he told the driver to hit it, get out of there, because that was what they were supposed to. We were supposed to evacuate the area, and so we were not familiar with the Dallas at all, and so the chief of police, Chief Curry, got in front of us in his car, and he led us to Parkland Hospital.
How long of a drive is that?
It took us about 4 minutes to get there.
Yeah,
and we
not
were
long.
running above 70 miles an hour as we traveled down this Stemmons Freeway. And I was lying up on back of the top seat of the back.
you would think he'd be going like 100 miles an hour. if the president was shot. You know, I mean, I guess I would. I don't know if they might have been trying to keep him safe, but how much safer can you get when you're shot in the throat and the back of the head? You should be flooring it to the hospital, my brother.
Backseat.
But
I
again, that's me.
kind of wedged myself in between the two sides of the car by hooking my leg on the right side and holding on with my hands on the left side so I wouldn't slide off, because we had to make some turns and it was a little precarious at a couple of points.
What's happening in the car at this time? What are the other people doing?
Nobody is saying anything. At first, Mrs. Kennedy made some comments. She said, "Oh, Jack, what have they done? They've shot his head off. I have his brains in my hand. I love you, Jack." And that was all she said. And then we raced to the hospital.
Dang.
When we got to the hospital, they had been alerted that we were coming by the chief of police. But there was nobody there outside to meet us at all. So the agent in the lead car jumped out, ran in. He found that there was a tenant trying to bring out two gurneys at the same time. They got caught in the doorway and couldn't do it. So he grabbed one of the gurneys and brought it out. And then the lieutenant brought the other one out. But we had to remove the governor from the car before we could do anything for the president because of the way the car was configured. So we got the governor up and put him on a gurney, and they rushed him into the emergency room. Then we were going to work and help the president get out, just take the president, put him on a gurney, but Mrs. Kennedy had a hold of him and she wouldn't let go. So I pleaded with her. I said, "Please, Mrs. Kennedy, let us help the president." And never got no response at all. And then I said that again, and I still didn't get any response. And then I thought to myself, I know what's wrong. I've been with her over 3 years now. I know her pretty well. She didn't want anybody to see the condition he's in because it was horrible. And so I took off my suit coat and I covered up his head and his upper back. As soon as I did that, she let go. We lifted him up, put him on a gurney, ran into the emergency room, put him in trauma room 1.
And then you waited with her?
Yeah, I waited in there. My assistant stayed immediately beside her. My supervisor asked me to open a phone line to the White House in Washington. So I asked the emergency room personnel to use one of their phones. They gave me a phone to use. We had a White House switchboard in Dallas that the White House Communications set up. I got a hold of that switchboard and told them to connect me to the White House and keep the line open. And so I was briefing my supervisor in Washington about what had happened, and the operator cut in. And he said, "Mr. Hill, the Attorney General wants to talk to you." So the Attorney General was Robert Kennedy, the President's brother. He said, "Clint," he said, "what's going on down there?" So I explained to him that there had been a shooting. The President he had been hit. Governor Connolly had been hit. We were in the hospital. They were doing what they could to try and help the two gentlemen. He said, "Well, how bad is it?" Now, I didn't want to tell Robert Kennedy that his brother was dead. So I just said, "It's as bad as it can get." And with that, he just hung up the phone. So
I don't think that helped much. As bad as it can get. I mean, for lack of better words, for sure.
At 1 o'clock, the doctor came out of the trauma room and said, "I'm sorry, but the president is dead. There's nothing more we can do." When that happened, the chief of staff came to me and said, "Clint, we want to transport the president's body back to Washington. Can you arrange to get us a casket?" So I got a hold of the administrator of the hospital, and they put me in touch with a mortuary, ordered a casket, and had it brought to the hospital, brought in, and they were preparing the president's body to be placed in the casket when one of the coroners came in. And he said, "What are you guys doing?" And we said, "We're preparing to transport the body back to Washington." He said, "You can't leave with the hospital." And we said, "Why not?" He said, "Because there's a law in Texas that says that a homicide victim has to be autopsied before he's released." And we said, "Well, how long will that take?"
Oh, what?
And they said, "Oh, an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe a day." And we said, "No, that's not acceptable." So then they agreed to allow us to take the president's body, provided we would provide a medical doctor with the body through the entire process. And so I volunteered Admiral George Berkeley, who was the president's military physician and happened to be there. And so he remained with the body right up through the autopsy.
What? I mean, the shooting was about 12:30 Dallas time.
Roughly 12:30 in the afternoon.
So the trauma physicians really only had a few minutes before they realized there was nothing
They realized almost instantly that nothing they could do. They didn't even turn the president's body over. They only looked at him from the front. They didn't realize that there were two gunshot holes in the back. One at about the neck level, that was the entrance point, and it exited where the necktie is, the knot, and it had nicked the knot.
Damn.
And the other one.
So imagine how far someone, or how well someone had to be able to shoot. You know, this can't be, in my opinion, this can't be some random guy who just hated the president. Dude took, if I'm not mistaken, he only took 2 shots. It may have been another one that I heard about where it ricocheted off a building or something, but for you to take a shot like that out of a building up high, while cars moving, not knowing what the wind is like, and you hit the president right through the back of the neck, and when it comes out through here, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy. That's crazy accurate. And then the next bullet just completely obliterates his head, his right side of his head. I mean, that's crazy, man. I think it's more to the story for sure.
A low in the back of the head that had exited above the ear. The one above the ear is the one that they saw immediately. No brain matter there. His eyes was fixed. There was no, he was breathing a little bit at the time that we got him into the emergency room. I guess it was just an involuntary situation, but that didn't last long, and there was no blood pressure and nothing.
Did you accompany Mrs. Kennedy on the flight back?
Yes, I did. When we got permission to remove the body and took the casket out to the ambulance that we had there, Edmund Berkeley got in the back of the ambulance with the casket. I suggested to Mrs. Kennedy that we ride in the car, and she said, "No, I'm going to ride in the back with the president." I said, "Okay." So I opened the door, and she got in, and I got in with her. And so there we were, 3 of us with the casket in the back of the hearse, all the way to Love Field. And we got to Love Field, and then the agents that I was working with, we all carried the casket up the stairs to the rear door of Air Force One. And we got to the rear door, we found that the casket was a little bit too wide with the handles on it to get through the door. So we had to tear the handles off in order to get it in the Air Force One. The chief engineers for the Air Force One had all the seats removed in a certain portion of the back of the aircraft so we could place the casket topside, not have to go into the belly of the plane. And we then prepared to leave, but Vice President and Mrs. Johnson were also on board. And he had been conferring with Washington and had received instructions that he should be sworn in while we were still on the ground in Dallas. And that required a federal judge. So we finally found Sarah Hughes, who had just been appointed a federal judge, brought her on board, and she was going to swear the then vice president in to be president. And just before that happened, I was in the forward portion of Air Force One. Mrs. Kennedy was back by the casket, and she sent word that she wanted to see me. So I went back through where the presidential part was and where she was, and she stood up and she grabbed my hand and she said, "Oh, Mr. Hill," she said, "what's going to happen to you now?" I said, "I'll be okay, Mrs. Kennedy, I'll be okay." She was concerned about myself and about the other agents, about how we were reacting, and because she knew how much we thought of the president. So then when that was over, they began the swearing-in ceremony, and she agreed to stand right next to Vice President Johnson as he took the oath of office for President of the United States.
Still wearing the same clothes?
She wouldn't take off her clothes. She said she wanted the people to see what had been done.
That's crazy.
It's amazing.
She had the same clothes on.
Testimony that she would be concerned about you.
That she had the same clothes on that she had on when her husband got killed that day.
I know it was shocking to me that she would be.
Obviously, the next few days would create even more upheaval with the murder of Oswald and the incredible funeral for the president, I believe, the day following that.
Well, we had a number of days. The day after we brought the casket to the White House, and it lay there in the White House through the 24th through the 23rd until the 24th, and then we had to move it to the U.S. Capitol, place it in state there on the 24th, and there were so many people who wanted to see it that they had to allow people to pass by it all day and all night that night. And then we went back on the 25th, Monday, and that was the day of the official funeral. Brought the body out of the rotunda of the Capitol, put on the cortege, and went back to the White House. And we got to the White House, we met about 110 or so visiting heads of state, heads of government, like Charles de Gaulle and Haile Selassie, King Baudouin of Belgium, the Queen of the Netherlands, and I mean, there were just so many heads of state there. And then Mrs. Kennedy decided to walk from that point to St. Matthew's Cathedral, and because she walked, all these heads of state walked, which created an absolute security nightmare for everybody as we walked up Pennsylvania Avenue to St. Matthew's Cathedral.
Was Mrs. Kennedy aware? Did she have any reaction to the murder of Oswald at the time?
She didn't find out about it because of how it happened. It happened on the 24th, just about the time we were taking the body out of the White House to put it on the cortege to take it to the Capitol. So she didn't know about it until at least later that day. But insofar as I never heard any reaction from her whatsoever.
That's pretty crazy. So Oswald got murdered the very next day. So what are the chances you plan to kill the president of the United States, assuming that takes, some pretty good planning, pretty good amount of time. You carry out what you're planning successfully, and then you're dead the next day. I feel like he would have got out of there. You know what I mean? If he killed the president, he would have had an escape plan, right? That's me just thinking logically. But for him to get murdered the very next day, that means somebody either knew what happened, something else is going on that they ain't telling us. And there is a lot more, conspiracy theories and all that type of stuff floating around on the internet. But yeah, that's weird. For him to die the very next day, sounds like they tried to shut him up and didn't want him to say anything. As if he didn't do it and somebody else did. I don't know, man.
Well, let me ask you this question first. Do you think if Oswald hadn't been murdered, that the conspiracies would not have arisen in the way that they did?
Oh, that's the case. The fact that he was murdered, the fact that we could not interrogate him and find out his motive and exactly why he did this, has created all the room for conspiracies of all kinds. And there's a new one every day. And I hear them all. And the one thing about it is they all are theories. They're not fact at all.
Jeez, man. So, hey, y'all let me know if y'all want to hear more about the assassination of JFK and, all the conspiracies. I will be glad to go down a wormhole on that. But, yeah, y'all have a good day. I'll be back with y'all with another one soon. I'm out.